Now, turning to our program, please welcome Jeremy Janine, owner and president of Urban Milwaukee, who will introduce our speaker.
Good morning. You've made it. We passed Labor Day, and you're here, smiling early in the morning. There's breakfast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Joe Gallamore from WisDOT. Reporter speak, Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and then Mike Hammond and Mike Ernst from HNTB. And I forget the last names that give you that firm, so you'll have to stick with that acronym. As a reporter, you're told not to read the comments. You're also told not to read the comments as a news consumer usually. Unfortunately, my role involves reading the comments. There's probably no project right now that is more confused in not just Urban Milwaukee's comment section, but any news outlet's comment section than the Interstate 794 project. And I wrote down some kind of things that we hear. Didn't they just rebuild it? It's a done deal for both sides of the argument. They're just getting torn down. It's getting rebuilt exactly as it is. And then why are they demolishing the Hone Bridge? And I will leave these gentlemen to explain exactly what's in the project, what's the timeline. But I encourage you today to listen, approach it with an open mind, hear about their process, and then to learn a little bit. I believe this project will need a Fonzie, and we'll learn a bit why that has more to do with Pete Buttigieg than Henry Winkler. So without any more, thanks, Joe, Mike, and Mike.
Thank you all for your hospitality today to have us here to speak to you about the Lake Interchange project. There is a lot of voices out there right now, and it's very good. One of the things we're trying to do is get the facts out there. So we welcome your feedback. We welcome your comments too. So we look forward to the questions. The study overview area is shown up there on the slide. That's the general area that we have. It basically goes from the Milwaukee River around to the Hone main span. But at the confines of there, we have a couple of alternatives that actually go a little bit further to the west, which we'll get into in a little bit here, that go towards the Marquette. We're right now in the study phase, and some of the small print up there, we're doing a lot of public outreach and public involvement to many different groups. We'll get into that a little bit later. We're doing alternative analysis, and then ultimately, as Jeremy mentioned, we're getting into the environmental documentation and some conceptual plans, some functional plans in the preliminary design phase. So what caused us to start looking at this? We have aging infrastructure. There's 28 bridge units that are out there that are originally built in the mid to 70s, and they're reaching the end of their useful life. Everything's safe, everything's good. We inspect the structures routinely, but they're just we have to start planning for what to do with these structures. Also, some of the other things as we look into it, some of the other things that are very important are the system linkages, obviously the roadway deficiencies, traffic safety, as those freeway movements move down the ramps to the local network. Obviously, the community connectivity is a big issue as well. So those are some of the things that the project needs for the Lake Interchange project. Here you see in yellow or orange the 28 bridge units that have not been replaced yet. So we've rehabbed the Home Bridge 794 with the new bridge deck, and we've also done some rehabilitation on these units since they started. And then towards the Marquette, which is over here to the west. I should also mention everything. Most of you are familiar with the map, but the north is to the top. Obviously, the lake is to the east, and the Marquette is just off the page to the west. Again, some of those bridge conditions were the origination of this study. We have some shiplap joints, which are shown there. They're very hard to inspect and very hard to maintain. Also, we have some bridge deck cracking and damage and scraping. Some of these pictures may look really bad, but they're still very strong. So everything is good from that standpoint. We try to find these scary pictures, right? So, what are some of the other things that we look at? Obviously, the substandard curves we've had, many of you maybe even have seen, trucks tip over on the west to southbound movement, the 35-mile-an-hour curve. So we've seen that actually from one of the windows of the downtown building where we're meeting at, right? So, so those are some of the safety things with the substandard curves. The ramp configurations, typically we like to be right-hand exit and entrance, but in this case, they're left-hand entrance and exit. And there may be a reason to keep that way too. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But shoulder widths on the bridge, weave lengths, and then the vertical bridge clearance from the catenary lines on the hop too at Broadway and Milwaukee as well. So vertical clearances are issues to look at. Obviously, on the city streets, we have 5-legged intersections. That makes it complicated for several different things. It's just not a typical intersection. Has a ramp coming right into a normal 4-way type of intersection. So there's a lot more confusion there. Makes it harder for bikes and peds and those kind of other users of the facility. So, and also we have a lot of sidewalk discontinuity in this area. So those are one of the other things that we want to look at as well. And obviously within urban environment like this, we have multiple users. And this is just a slide we like to show that talks about all the different users of this particular area. And it gets into the connectivity issues that we've talked about and specifically in sidewalk that I just mentioned. Thank you. So looking at this slide here, it has about 75,000 vehicles that use the Lake Interchange area, excuse me, per day, and that's at the Milwaukee River. About 43,000 that's at the Hone. And obviously within this area, there's 8 different ramp locations, which is quite a lot for this area. The Milwaukee Broadway, Van Buren, and Jackson, and then the lakefront ramps, and then also the ramps coming off the Hone. So there's one particular stat we like to talk through this, just to point out, is that roughly 1/3 of that 75,000 vehicles is going through the interchange from basically the Marquette to the Hone or vice versa. So there's a big through movement per day. During the peak hour, looking at our origination and destination numbers, there's roughly 68% or 45%. So say roughly 50% during the peak hour and the PM peak that make that same movement. That's that portion of the 26,000 that go through. But there's also a big portion that goes, downtown, 55% from the west going down to the lakefront, and then 71% coming back. So those are just some pretty important numbers to look at.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Mike Hammond with HNTB, consultant working on behalf of the Department of Transportation on this project, really focusing on public outreach with this project. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our engagement approach and process on this project. So really it's grounded in an approach of listening first. And really what that means is we wanted to meet with stakeholders and the public really early on in the study to understand needs and priorities before we got too far along and started to develop actual design concepts. So to that end, we've had over 2,000 comments on the project from the public thus far, either through our website or through our in-person engagement events. We've also held several stakeholder one-on-one meetings with entities like yourself who are engaged in this corridor on a day-to-day basis to understand their needs and priorities, whether it's for their employees, their group, their association, what have you. We've also developed 2 advisory committees, and really what those are is it's a business advisory committee, which has developers, real estate interests, office tenants engaged in the downtown. And we also have a stakeholder advisory committee, and that's really your local municipal governments, agencies, neighborhood groups, community associations. And those advisory committees have really been key for our team in terms of serving as a sounding board to bring ideas, bring needs and priorities to them, serving as a check before we engage the general public on the project. Speaking of the general public, for those of you who aren't aware, we held our first public involvement meetings on the project just about a month ago, on August 1st and 2nd. And that was really our first opportunity to share some of the initial design concepts that our team has developed. So we had a great attendance at those. Over 800 people attended. As I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of public interest in this project. Over 1,000 comment forms submitted. So right now our team is really in the thick of it in terms of sifting through those comments, starting to understand how did people react to these initial design concepts as we determine our next steps on the study. Speaking of next steps, overall study schedule is now on the screen. I'll probably mention it again. We are very early. There has been no decisions made on this project. We started in the summer of last year in 2022. Really, again, working with stakeholders in the public to establish those needs and priorities before we got too far along. Develop those initial design concepts that Mike's going to talk in a little bit about. And then we're really going to start to narrow that down to a set of alternatives, start to work our way towards an environmental document. And then really we would hope to have this study wrapped up in the second half of next year. If everything goes according to plan, pending funding availability, we'd move on to final design and construction. Construction could start as early as 2026 or 2027. Now, a question we get a lot is kind of how is this process going to play out? And again, no decisions have been made. So right now we're in the yellow box in terms of concept development. So on the far left side of the screen is really where we started last summer. Again, focusing on needs and priorities. Our team went to the drawing board, developed some initial design concepts that we'll go over today, shared those with the public. And then we're going to start to actually form alternatives based on those design concepts. We're going to continue to roll those out to the public, and then you're going to start to see us narrow those alternatives down, eventually working our way to a recommended alternative, and then finally a preferred alternative, which would be captured in our environmental document. And throughout that process, we're going to be narrowing those alternatives and these design concepts based on the purpose and need that Joe covered. We're going to work through things like constructability, cost, public input, and then environmental impacts. So those will really form the key and the bedrock of how we narrow these alternatives down. So that process is a little preview of kind of how the next year and a half will play out. Next, I'm going to toss it to Mike, who's going to talk to you about the initial design concepts that we've developed.
Thanks, Mike. Hi there. My name is Mike Ernst, and my role in the project is to oversee the development of the geometric alternatives that we're going to share with you today. When we talk about these concepts, and I think it's important to recognize that Mike very deliberately used the word concept versus alternative, because we don't know what we're going to build yet. And we like to think of these concepts in these buckets, if you will, these groups. First, there's the no build, which isn't going to be an option on the lake interchange because we've got structures that are going to need to be replaced. So we're going to have to do something out here, which leads us to the replace in kind bucket. So this is, I kind of like to think of this as the baseline. This is the bare minimum of what the department needs to do to reconstruct those 28 structures that are remnant from the early or mid-70s that need to be replaced. And then we've got the freeway improvement, and this is leaving the elevated infrastructure through the heart of downtown, but doing something different with it. We got some ideas that we're going to show you here today, but I would encourage you all to go to the website because we have all 9 ideas on there. We're not going to share all 9 ideas here today. And then the idea that the concept that's probably got the most attention so far is the freeway removal concept. So we'll show you one idea here today. So this is that baseline. This is the replacing kind. This is what those 28 structures look like, and one of our engineering drawings kind of spruced up. What I think is most interesting about this here, I don't want to push this off. What I think is most interesting here is, I know this is a drawing, but that's how much infrastructure is remnant out there that needs to be replaced. It's 28 bridges, and it's a pretty big footprint. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be replaced that haven't been as part of the Marquette or the Holm Bridge, and sometimes people forget that. But these are untouched bridges from the mid-70s. But if we're going to reconstruct all this, there's a lot of opportunity, and that's what the department is committed to looking at. So this is one of the freeway improvement concepts, and a couple themes I just want to point out to you here with the freeway improvement concepts is you'll see Clybourne is shown as a bidirectional roadway between Lincoln Memorial Drive and the river. The reason we do that is because we're trying to create more connectivity for people who are, say, at the river that want to get to the east, because we're going to be asking folks that want to enter the freeway in these freeway improvement concepts to enter the freeway through consolidated ramps. Joe mentioned that there's 8 access points today. I didn't point it out on the previous slide, but with the replace in kind, we would maintain all 8 access points. With all the improvement concepts, we're consolidating those 8 access points to 4. 2 entering and exiting from the west, and 2 entering and exiting from the south. In this concept, I want to point out that the freeway is wider. Excuse me, you can particularly see that on the west. You can see if you look even further to the west of the river. Excuse me, I think it's coming back early from a Labor Day weekend here. These breakfast meetings, you guys are committed. So you can see that the existing infrastructure today deviates west of the river. You can see the footprint kind of sets itself apart, and that creates what's this void in the middle. So with this freeway improvement alternative or concept, excuse me, we're trying not to go further to the west. The advantage there is that we can save more infrastructure. The trade-off is that we have a limited ability to consolidate the footprint. Let's see here. So now this is a second freeway improvement concept we want to share with you. And you can see the limits on this concept go much further to the west and further to the south. The reason that you see that is because with this concept, we're trying to consolidate the freeway footprint to the maximum extent possible. It is worth noting that we haven't done all the traffic evaluation on these concepts, so how big the intersections would need to be, none of that's been really vetted yet. We like to think of this as about 10 or 15% design. But we're trying to get a rough understanding of what's possible out there and what could potentially be reopened for either development or other uses in the heart of downtown here with these freeway improvement concepts. Now this is the one that's probably getting the most attention, at least if you're on social media, which again, we would encourage you to go to WisDOT's their website, not social media. You get the best information there. But this is the freeway removal concept, and this is the one that's getting quite a bit of attention. So in this concept here, if you're on I-94, let's say you're coming from AmFam Field, and you're gonna come into downtown. When you cross underneath the Marquette Interchange, you're basically at about street level before you come up to the elevated infrastructure today. So with this concept here, we keep you at street level, and you would enter. We would create Clybourne at the end of. Where 94 crosses underneath Marquette. If you were on I-43 and you wanted to enter downtown, we would keep you elevated over the top of the streetcar maintenance facility and some of the other infrastructure out there, and we would touch you down at 2nd Street. One of the advantages to this alternative here, this concept, is that by separating I-94 traffic and 43 traffic, you're getting better utilization of the grid. There's another free removal concept out there that kind of brings them all down in one location. We haven't done the traffic yet. We're working on it right now, but that would be, we're expecting it to be a pretty large intersection, which is not necessarily desirable. So we're working through those details right now. This would have the entire network at grade west of the Milwaukee River. So you'd cross the Milwaukee River, Clybourne would be extended, and then you would connect to Lincoln Memorial Drive with that city grid. And then if you're coming or going from the south, say you're in the south suburban communities, you would then begin your grade separation. You'd be at grade to St. Paul, then through Chicago, then you'd start coming up, and this would leave the Hone Bridge intact. So this does not remove the Hone Bridge. So we have some conceptual 3D renderings, and I think you'll see more of these as we get through the process. These were shared at the public involvement meetings. What's really nice about these is it kind of gets you a little bit of a bird's eye view of what is possible out there. In the upper left-hand corner, well, actually, let me just go to the far left is a picture of the existing infrastructure. In the upper left-hand corner is the existing infrastructure modeled in our 3D program. In the upper right, that's the separated mainline idea. So if we're not impacting more infrastructure, we're not bringing the infrastructure together, that's kind of what it would look like. You can see on the left-hand side of that, there's the bidirectional Clybourne. And then lower left, that's the tight mainline configuration that, of course, requires us to impact more of the existing infrastructure out there, but it also affords us the opportunity to consolidate the freeway footprint even more. And then in the lower right-hand corner, that's kind of an idea of what the at grade would look like the freeway removal would look like. And I just want to note that we call it freeway removal because it is badged as an interstate highway today. If it's not an elevated infrastructure, it's no longer an interstate. So that's why we call that the freeway removal. So I think at that kind of sums up the alternatives. I think I'll turn it back to Joe for the next steps here.
Thanks, Mike. So our next steps, obviously, we're in the process of just getting the 2 PIMs that we had, and we had 800 people there. We're going through those. We have also 1,000 comments to go through. So we're looking through those now, taking that feedback. Obviously, we're going to continuously take comments. By all means, go to our website. You can put in comments. I think till when's the public comment period for the PIMs? Ended on Friday. Okay, but we're still taking public comments, and it's not going to be the last time that we go to the public, right? We're going to have several more meetings that will be announced. They're to be determined yet, but I think roughly the next time will be the first quarter of next year, because our team has a lot of work to do to take all those comments back and then to start the evaluation process that Mike talked about. So next steps, review those comments. Then we're going to identify concepts to advance as alternatives. I'll say that I do not see any of these buckets being removed as we move forward to the next PIM, so I just mentioned that right now. Advanced traffic analysis, it takes a lot to look at the traffic modeling for these different concepts or bucket groups, as Mike talked about. So that's what's taking this time. We need that time to really evaluate. And then we're going to hold a second public meeting, as I mentioned, in early 2024. So with that, we'll turn our attention to some questions.
And as a reminder for questions, please do keep them concise. And if you would like to ask a question, please come up here.
Well, I won't make a comment, but I live on 3rd and St. Paul, so I have a vested interest in this project. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but did you talk about the difference in the range of costs with the options? I've read quite a bit about that there is quite a range, and that's obviously a consideration as we go down the freeway to the decision point.
Thank you for that question. As Mike had alluded to, cost will be one of those factors we have to look at. But right now, the team does not have any numbers. But that's the other thing that we're cranking on right now. It will be, I'll say, an expensive project. Whichever one of those alternatives you look at, it's going to be a significant amount of money. Funding we haven't really talked about yet, because depending on the concept groups, there could be multiple different funding methods that happen. So there's going to be a lot more discussion on that, and sorry, I can't give you. I sure will. So the question was, in that particular case, there's a wide range of costs that have been talked about, and I think there have been maybe in the media per se, but not necessarily from the department's perspective. So what could I explain what those costs would be? And right now we're not at that point to talk about costs.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear that you're at this preliminary stage of this very important project. Have you calculated the backup of entry onto and exit from the freeway during peak rush hours? And how will you factor that into the various models that you have?
So the question is, okay. All right, closer. Oh, hey, there we go. All right, thank you. I was hearing it fine, so. So the question again was, have we looked at the actual, say, peak hour traffic of the delays that would be happening, either getting to downtown or leaving downtown? And so that's part of what we're going to be working on right now as far as the detailed numbers. But we have done some early diversion numbers, and we've determined that I would say with the concept, the alternative that's the freeway improvement, is there's going to be diversion no matter which alternative, unless we go replace in kind. That would be pretty much similar to what's going on now. But there'll be diversion no matter which one we go with. From the other last two concepts would be the freeway removal or the freeway improvement, because we're removing ramps. But the freeway improvement one's diversion, when we looked at that, has been more localized along 794 sort of pushed back from the lake going backwards along 794 to the Market Interchange. And then the diversion that happens with the freeway removal is roughly about 1/3 of that traffic will be able to get into, we'll say, Clybourne extended, as a two-way. And then 1/3 would be going to the north, diverting, on 43 north or other local roads to the north, and then 1/3 43 south and 1/3 south. But now we're going to start diving in. We got proof of concept as far as all these alternatives that we've looked at, but we haven't done the detailed modeling that's going to be happening over the next 4 to 6 months.
You showed us lots of scary pictures of the Home Bridge. What are the plans for the Home Bridge?
That's a good question, and obviously the Home Bridge, as far as that's separate or out of the scope of this project, beyond tying in the concepts that you saw there. And we didn't show all the concepts, but they're roughly the same limits that we've shown there. The Home Bridge, had a redeck not too long ago, back in 2013. Obviously, was painted as well. And anything to do with the Home Bridge will be a separate project or a separate study in the future.
Hi, I've been invested in this project as both a homeowner in Bayview and also a reporter and editor who has been fascinated by how this conversation has been taken over on Twitter, with it making it sound like we absolutely must tear down the Hone, and anyone who says otherwise should be squashed like an ant. And may I have a request and then a clarification. May I encourage you guys to develop some relationships with, if your comms people haven't already, to develop some steady relationships with some of the media here to help kind of explain, technical explanations have been accurately reported, but the meaning of who would benefit from what? Why do businesses want this option or that option? I know there's some funded interest here, and there always are, but this project is especially complicated for even trained researchers to follow. So I'm glad it's taken a long time. I'm glad you guys have done the outreach and been to your meetings, submitted comments. My clarification is, with the tightened mainline construction, would that be a compromise that would give the business community that wants more land to develop a little bit more of what they want, and it helps people like me who have stayed in the city after moving here from another place because of the fact that I can get from Bayview to Whitefish Bay and to the ballpark or Waukesha quickly, because I don't have to go down to street level and then come back up again. And the same would be true of the reverse.
Sure, there's a couple different questions I heard in there, and the first one I would say is that's one of the reasons why, and you heard Mike here comment on our website. Please go to the website. We have all the slides you saw today are on the website, and even more. So all the public meeting, and we'll continue to use that venue to make sure that we have that information out there, so that it's sanctioned and it's what the department is thinking, right? So we don't have all the answers today, but we're working through the process. So that's my answer, for the media and others. Obviously, we can try to meet or give interviews. I know my colleagues, Trevor and Dan, have given plenty of conversations for the 794. And then obviously the back and SAC we're meeting as well. And all the different, we've had, 1 or 2 meetings a week, talking to individuals, whether it's local politicians or aldermen, you name it. We're trying to communicate and definitely listen to what's needed. The second part of your question is about the width there, and I think another good point is that all of these alternatives, every one of them, have some land that could be developed with them, even the replacing kind. We actually took the joint parcel that was in development. Right now, the contractor that's building the Couture is leasing that area for their equipment and so forth, but that was a parcel that jointly the department and the city had on the market. And so we took that off in the beginning of the study, knowing that, obviously some of these concepts that we're now creating could impact that. So we took it off the market, but that eventually will go back on the market in whatever footprint is left. And then there's additional opportunities for development on all these different concepts. there is a substantial amount of acreage that, by bringing those two main lines together, for potential development in the future. So there'll be more discussion on that. Oh.
So I have two questions. One, the city and county can't really afford diddly squat right now. So I know it's too early for the numbers, but what amount of the burden will end up on the city and the county, ignoring the long-term benefits of more development? Just how much of this cost will they bear, roughly, just percentage-wise or something? And how would they do that? And then the second question is, you're going to let loose a lot of crazy drivers from the freeway onto the city streets. So has the sheriff's department or other safety departments been in conversation with you about what the traffic calming might be? For example, if you eliminated all those ramps and made it all go in Clybourne.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks for the first question on the funding. We haven't, I like to call it the color of money, right? Whether it's federal, state, local, private, TIF, whichever. There's all those things are probably in the mix, and they might be all different for the different concepts that are there. So we really are too early on that. Eventually we'll get to that question. So we may say, if we can fast forward, 6-9 months, we might have that answer a lot better as far as that. But really, the construction, we're in the study now. We have to go through preliminary and final design, and then into construction, and even real estate and utilities, are another step in there. There's a lot of different funding alternatives. It could be, it could be, a majors project. It could be a high-cost bridge project. It could be a Southeast Freeways mega project. It could be local funding and all that associated with all those different alternatives. So there's plenty of this, discussion we have to do. We're trying to get, it might be several different scenarios in there that we'll be working on over the next few months. Your second question, I'm sorry, my memory's getting me now. Okay, yeah, very, very good question. Safety, one of the things that we've been looking at for these concepts is how could we implement, and we haven't sized the intersections, but we want to make it usable for all users. I'm talking about the street, anything along Clybourne or any improvements to the local grid. But what could we do to slow down traffic coming from the ramps? And one of the things we looked at, and I can maybe pull it up a little bit more, but it's hard to see at this scale. And really it's really covered up. Maybe this is the best to see it. If we bring those ramps, like let's say at Van Buren and Jackson, down straight into the local grid system, instead of curving right in there to where people either speed up getting on or they're decelerating and it ends up being a block or two to the north. If we bring them in more at a 90 and make them purposefully turn, that was one way that we can try to control that intersection a little bit more. And then if we can go from a five-legged intersection to a four-legged intersection, what that can do is just makes it so much more predictable and usable from a pedestrian and a bicycle standpoint.
As a big fan of freeway removal, have you thought about the way that a transportation hub and increased parking could allow a better public transportation access throughout the city? This might allow us to absorb downtown traffic and make it easier for people to move within the city rather than going right through it.
Well, one of the things, we're looking at multiple different users for here, and as far as a hub goes from a traffic facility, the department has park and rides, those kind of things that we partner with. But other than that, we're not going to impact the hop. We're going to impact the hop more than likely with just the construction process. But the purpose of that would be to maintain the hop and not impact it as little as possible. Obviously, you have BRT and other different users from the county services, their bus systems. All those are going to stay intact. I know there are several parking garages. And I will say this too about the underneath the freeway. All that land is currently in county highway parcels right now. So that would be, that's how it's going to impact the county from that perspective. But the parking itself may not be the highest and best use of that land, and we're seeing that. But now, obviously, there are many users of that, and that would be something that have to be evaluated as we move forward with those freeway removal concepts. What stays and what goes in those concepts still have to be looked at in the design. So we'll get further in there. But as far as having a hub, we'll be partnering with the city, and I would look to the city and the county to look at other means and methods for BRT enhancement or the hop enhancement or other things that are out there. Hopefully I answered your question. Yes, sir.
Morning, thank you. Wondering if you're with reduction or removal on 794, do the studies show what happens, especially coming from the south to the 94 traffic? And is that freeway then going to need to be rebuilt or expanded to take the additional traffic if there's not an alternative coming from 794?
Yes, and that's actually part of our modeling that we're going to do. We used to use Paramix, now we use VISM modeling. We'll have a VISM model for several of the at that point alternatives, and we'll look at what those impacts would be. Right now on 43, obviously during the peak hour, there's already a lot of traffic, so those things are there. Obviously, we have rehab projects and reconstruction further north on 43 that's going on presently. But at some point in the future, we'll have to address reconstruction of the rest of the system. It's going to have the same kind of asset management or needs that are going to come up in the future. So we'll have to look at that, and at that point in time, in a separate process, a separate study, we would look at expansion or no expansion, or based on what the needs would be at that point in time. So specifically for 43, either south of the Marquette or north of the Marquette. So there's been no talk of that yet now as a Southeast Mega or Majors or anything like that. But we're, obviously we're, managing those assets and rehabbing them as we need. And we'll have more of those traffic numbers that we'll present at the future PIM of what those models show, what delays they have, what level of service and so forth is there from that. So, yeah.
Going back to the freeway removal option or design, it looks like one of the biggest vulnerabilities there is the bridge over Clybourne Boulevard, I guess, over the river. Has some consideration been made to possibly move the taller leisure cruises somewhere else so they wouldn't impact that often, or raise that bridge up as high as possible to get 95% of the traffic through?
Two questions there I heard. As far as the structure, we looked at, just I say briefly, we'd want to look at it more thoroughly, I think. As far as a Clybourne structure over, an actual physical structure over the river, and just the grades that we would have to do are pretty limiting. It would actually impact Water Street. It would impact Broadway. So there would be, sort of counterintuitive to get up to it. And if one of our goals is to help connectivity, we'd actually be going sort of backwards on that particular alternative if we try to go over with the physical bridge on Clybourne. But that's not a final answer, right? Let's look at it a little bit further. As far as the river cruises and that's another user of the facility or the area that we'll need to consider. But there's been no talk that I know of at this point of saying, oh, we're going to limit this. I mean, that's going to be more of a partnership with the city at that point. So we haven't considered anything like that. That kind of ordinance would have to come from the municipality.
Hi, two quick questions, I hope quick. One a little more global and one local. We took down the Park East Freeway 20 plus years ago, and at that time there was a lot of that going on nationally, the Embarcadero, other stuff. Wondering where are things now as we look around the country? Are there still, is there an effort to bring things down to grade more? Is there more removal of this? And then just with the experience of the Park East and how that informed and influenced us, how much impact does that have? How much relevance does that have to what you're doing now and what we're thinking about as a community?
You know, and I wouldn't call myself an expert nationally, right? I'm focused on within the state projects, but you know, from my research, and obviously our consultant has experience nationally. There are other projects that are going on, probably more than we can mention right on now on our hand. But so I would say that 794 is its own corridor. You know, as far as a comparison to the Park East is different than what the 794 facility is. The 794 with the system linkages and the need to get to the port, obviously downtown, the port, the south side communities. It's just a different facility than the Park East. Now, there's some similarities you can say from the standpoint of a removal or freeway removal standpoint, but as far as the users of that, they're different than the Park East. I think I answered your questions. Was there another one that I missed? Yeah.
Hi, quick technical question this time. When do the current 9 options get officially whittled down to whatever number they'll be whittled down to? And then who has the final vote on where we go? Is it the Common Council? Is it the county? Like who kind of has the final say in what we decide to do?
Two good questions. As I mentioned earlier, just to sort of set people, everybody could take a sigh of relief. I don't foresee us removing any of the alternative buckets, as we call them, or concept areas until the next PIM. We're going to be presenting what we find out because there's still so much information we need to bring to the public. But this NEPA process, the decision is going to be made by the Department of Transportation. It's an informed decision process. The NEPA process we have to follow, and that's why we're going out and getting all the public comments, meeting with so many people to try to make that informed decision for the Lake Interchange study. So, we'll have to, as Mike alluded to, whittle or funnel those down. We're doing, there's some individual design elements within each concept that I think we can, once we know more as we design it and do the traffic modeling, we'll realize, this one sort of elevates itself from the other one. And I'm talking about subgroups now, so that we can probably come back to you with, in the first quarter with, hey, this is a freeway removal, this is a freeway improvement, and this is a replacing kind, enhanced kind of alternative at that point. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.